Hey, welcome to X-Oriente, or should I say welcome back to X-Oriente. This is actually our third attempt
Well done.
at doing this live. We're just having some technical bugaboos today, and so if you've been on the live stream before, we're just decided we're going to start over. If you've sat through a lot of this, it's going to get better the second time. Third time is the
Sure.
charm.
Yeah. Hit fast forward. See what we care.
So with that, I'll just say I'm Eric Diamond,
And I'm Jason Van Dyke
and
again.
we're your hosts. And I'd like to now introduce our guest. This is Heather D. Fulton. Heather is a member of LeDroit Humain. Did I say that right? Good, because I'm actually trying to teach myself French.
There you
I
go.
don't speak French. You might pronounce it better than I do, honestly.
Well, I should know better then. So Heather is a member of LeDroit Humain, and that is a Masonic order that, well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is?
Sure. So it is a Masonic order that accepts men and women, and originated out of France in the late 1800s. Is the Order of International Freemasonry for men and women. LeDroit Humain, or LeDroit Humain, depending on how Americanized you want to pronounce it.
Yeah, I'm pretty Americanized, unfortunately. So I guess one question that I have about the organization is it affiliated with the Grand Orient of France, or is it a completely separate thing?
It is affiliated.
So would it be fair to say that it's sort of the international version of the GOF, or would that not be accurate? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to understand, like, why is it called LeDroit Humain and not just the Grand Orient of Portland, or where, whatever, like, you know what I mean?
I'm not actually sure why it's not just called Freemasonry or the Grand Orient of international. I don't know how they would even word that. I know that it was originally, like, Marie de Rem in the late 1800s was, as I understand it, initiated into an already existing part of the Grand Orient of France. Oh.
Cool.
But she later, for various reasons, kind of branched off and became its own thing. And LeDroit Humain translates to the human right. And the idea was to call it something that kind of, as I understand it, conveys that it is a human right as a seeker, just to have a space to connect and be with like-minded people.
So how did you get hooked up with LeDroit Humain? And feel free to give us the long-winded version, because we only got the short version last time.
Yeah.
We like long-winded.
Well, I guess there isn't probably too much crossover yet between the two. So I just, for those of you who haven't heard of them, it is a fairly new podcast, so probably haven't. A couple friends of mine out of Portland here have started a podcast called My Alchemical Bromance, and I just gave that this long-winded answer on that podcast as well. So if you listen to both of them, feel free to skip over. I moved to Oregon from Southern California, and in late 2009, and I did not look into how to make it through such a dark winter. So I ended up around the same time as my Saturn return, if you believe in such things, in a very dark period of my life. I was living in a basement apartment, and I telecommuted. I was there all the time. And winter here, after daylight savings, really starts about like 5 o'clock. By 6 o'clock, it's like midnight black. And that lasts till, it feels like March, at least. And I was unprepared. And the result of this period for me was that I started looking back inwards at things that I had set aside when I was younger. So I was raised fundamentalist Christian, and I had kind of in my late teens just decided I can't wrestle with this anymore internally. I'm a fairly analytical person, and even as a kid, preteen, I read the Bible all the time and was trying to figure out how to rectify some internal questions that I had about it. And I just wasn't getting the answers from my community. And I just kind of set it all aside and lived externally for a good while. And during this dark, literally dark, but also like I was just challenged internally. I looked inward at these sort of things that I grew up with and realized the struggle that I had to communicate with myself internally, because I had these kind of, in my mind, misconceived ideas of what the divine was. And I, over the period of a few months, just thought about these things a lot of contemplation, and didn't call it that at the time. At the time, I just thought I was worried. In hindsight, what I was doing was I was contemplating the nature of reality and nature of myself and what I really wanted. And I had this very particular moment I can remember where I was actually on a lunch break, telecommuting. I was just at home and I realized that the conversation I was having internally was, I don't mean actual conversation, but just kind of that thought process that you have when you're gnawing on something. And it was
that internal dialogue, right?
Yeah. And I was still having that with this kind of like, beneficent dictator who might judge you horribly at any given time. And realized that I still had the structure, even though I'd rationally let that go. I hadn't really come to terms with what that meant internally. And once I let that go, I started just asking myself, well, what is it if you don't have this approval system that, this angry God is telling you you're okay or you're not okay? What is it that you're actually looking for? What is this thing that you seem to be seeking? And I got this very clear, after asking that over and over internally for about 20 minutes, I had this moment where I just had my eyes closed and I saw this little like spark of light, and I got simultaneously this word truth, like a capital T, and like it all made sense to me at that moment. I was like, oh, I'm just trying to figure out what's true. Like it's not complex. I mean, it's also extremely complex, but it's a simple concept. And once I kind of grasped that, I felt this like ease in understanding what I was looking for, and went back to work. Lunch break was over, and I had seen
it's a hell of a lunch break.
No kidding.
Yeah.
My lunch breaks are much, much less profound.
Yeah. So were mine. That was a rare, well, not a one-off, but definitely the most profound of my life thus far. And I went back, and I had, like months earlier, stumbled upon this video that was it was just a rose in the sunlight. It was a Rosicrucian, like, I don't even know what it was. I don't know who made it. I saw it. I didn't think about it again, really. And it came back to mind, and I tried to find it again. I Googled it. And instead of finding that video, I found a bunch of stuff on Freemasons. And I remembered that my grandfather and his grandfather, and as far as I know, his grandfather on my mother's side, the Whitlock family, who's actually out of Portland here, had been Freemasons. And not my father, but other people on his side, the Arthur family, had also been Freemasons. And I started wondering if so many people in my family found this to be a worthwhile pursuit. Maybe it's worth me looking into. And I expected to end up at like an Eastern Star website or something. I wasn't sure what I was going to find, but I Googled Freemasonry for men and women, and almost the first thing that came up was LeDroit Humain. But it was the French page, So I had to have it translated, and Google Translate translated it for me. And I reached out to them, and then they translated my email and translated it back, and then sent me to email after email. I was connected with the Seattle Evergreen Triangle in Seattle, where I now am.
So your
That's
lodge
how
is
I came to it.
So your lodge is in Seattle.
My lodge is in Seattle, correct?
Okay,
That's a hell of a trip. How long does it take you to get the lodge?
So I actually, about 3 hours, 20 minutes, 3.5 hours if we stop for coffee or something.
Wow.
There are a number of us who come up from Portland. There's actually 2 members who've been initiated this year who are also in Portland, husband and wife, and another woman who we often will drive up together and meet up with our Right Worshipful Master, who lives in outside of Lacey, I think. She's a little bit further east, and then we'll meet up and carpool the rest of the way. So sometimes I have to drive the whole thing, but rarely. And actually, there's another woman, Valerie Espinoza, who lives here in Portland, who flies to LA for her lodge meeting.
Wow.
So
wow.
she's a member of Amor Serpiente down there. Yeah, so it's different.
Yeah.
Especially on the West Coast.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, the distances are much greater. That reminds me of, and I can't think of his name, Bill, the writer, Bill something or another, who did a walk in the woods. Really funny guy. He's an American writer, but he lived a long time in England. And he was trying to explain how the English think about distances, and people on the continent in general think about distances, and they will freak out at an hour and a half drive or a 2-hour drive. They go nuts. Like, oh my God, you have to pack provisions, and that's a journey to get in your car and go that far. And he was like, United States, man, we will drive 2.5 hours for a good taco. 100%.
Yeah,
That's true.
I had an ex who had his mom in from out of town. She was from Connecticut.
Yeah.
And one day after lunch, she's like, they're like, what do you want to do? What have you heard about Oregon? She's like, oh, well, I thought we could go down to Cascade Lake this evening. Like, why don't we just go visit it? And they, oh gosh, Cascade Lake, that's not, I think I'm messing up the story because I'm forgetting a huge typical Portland or Oregon landmark right now. Crater Lake. Wow. Don't mind me.
Go.
Crater Lake, which is in southeastern Oregon. And it's, I want to say, a 9 to 10 hour drive if you stop, like you live with your family regularly. And she was like, what do you mean? It's in the same state. Well, states are a little bigger sometimes.
Yeah. Oregon is Oregon is no Connecticut.
No, not at all. As you get
Connecticut is so small you have to go outside to change your mind. Right.
Right. It's just a suburb of New York.
So what is it? So you're in this situation where you're kind of in this kind of spiritual quest, and what is it about Masonry that attracted you to it? What did you think you'd find there, or hope that you'd find?
So the short answer to that is community, I suppose. I didn't have too many expectations on what I would find there. The process of synchronicities abounded after that day for me, and I just started really trusting my own process and learning. And when things so clearly led to this path, I trusted it. So I trusted that whatever I found there would be important, and I didn't try to find out what would be there. I just wanted to go through the process, and that's still where I am. I feel like that's just the path that I'll be on. Mm-hmm. And just what came along with that process for me was an understanding of how you can know yourself in a way that you can trust yourself, so you can check in with what feels like, and I want to say feel, and our touchy-feely is such as so much verbal baggage, but when you feel like something just is right, you know it's right. I don't know how to say it. I didn't go in with a lot of expectations, and quite the contrary, I tried to not have any. What drew me to it was that it felt right.
Mm-hmm. So our Masonic system is male only, and I know that that there are strictly feminine obediences. LeDroit Humain is a co-ed. What do you think are the I mean, pros and cons, I guess, of that kind of system? Is it well, I guess the first question that I would have is: are the majority of people in your lodge women, or is it a mix of women and men?
It's definitely a mix. It's a majority. It's probably about 70-30, I want to say. 70, yeah, 70% women, 30% men. At least from what I've seen. I'm not sure what it is in other countries or even on the East Coast. But it's probably about, it's definitely, I'd say a majority of women, but not significantly so. And it depends from lodge to lodge, and even from year to year. It kind of, as we have people come in, or, move across the country and what have you.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I tell people, like when people ask me, like, what is the purpose of Masonry, and why is your organization male only? What I tell people is that Freemasonry exists as a way to teach men how to love and care for each other, and be emotional with each other in a masculine context. Now, obviously, that doesn't apply to LeDroit Humain. So my question for you would be, like, what do you see the purpose of Freemasonry? What is the purpose of Freemasonry to a member of LeDroit Humain?
I would say to the perfection of humanity, the betterment of humanity. Everything you said, I agree with. If you use men as the often used, encompassing, you reference mankind, you're referencing men and women.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to be emotional and love each other and love ourselves and respect someone regardless, just because they might see something differently than you, but being able to come into a space where, and an understanding where you can still have that brotherly love for them. That's an important lesson regardless of gender.
Mm-hmm. And
I think as a society, gender lines are getting very blurred. It's an interesting topic, and I think it's going to be more challenging, even for us, because we have some lodges that say sister and brother, and some lodges that say just brother, and some people we haven't had any gender questions come up in our lodge yet, but it's something that I think that we're all, in our places of work, in our friend circles, we're just going to have to come up against these questions of gender and gender fluidity and what have you in the coming decades. And I don't think it flies against anything that you've said at all. I think it's just going to be more of an all-encompassing, thinking about how you would treat a brother and applying that to whatever human is in front of you. Also, I do want to say, I think our society also has, waxing rather abstract now, but doesn't have a whole lot of clear support or ideas about masculinity or femininity. And femininity has its own challenges that are long-standing, which I could go on about. But masculinity, I feel like, is at a specifically challenging point as well right now, in that there isn't a whole lot of clear-cut, like, this is how you're supposed to act. A lot of things are being challenged and appeased, and I think male-only masculine masonry is important that it exists in its own right, as a space for men to connect in a way that they just don't necessarily have elsewhere. I certainly am not personally of the opinion that, you know, all lodges should be co-ed or co-gender or whatever the correct term is.
Yeah.
I think it's a choice that should be able to be made personally by each lodge, and be able to communicate together and work, do this work together, because we are doing this work together, and it'd be nice to be able to communicate about that more. But regardless, I do think that Freemasonry plays an important role. It always has, but right now, maybe it's just more relevant to me because this is my generation, but from what I've seen of what it's brought to the lives of men who I know, I think it's important and impactful. And everyone's path is different.
Yeah.
But if someone's path leads from there, then they're going to get a lot out of it and be better men for it.
I mean, I will say this. I mean, you've opened my eyes in this respect, in that, when I would tell people that, I was referring strictly to gender. What I would say is that it's not that male masonry regards women as inferior. It's quite the opposite. It's like we have a lot of issues to work on before, we're ready to sort of take on. But here's the thing. Here's why I think that this is really interesting. Is you brought that up, and I went, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, I should treat a woman who is sort of not necessarily my wife or someone that I'm in a relationship with, just like I would treat, in other words, I should be able to love that person in the same way that I would love my brother. There's absolutely, you're right. There's absolutely no difference in that. That never came into my head. You know what I mean? Until you mentioned it, and I'm like, oh yeah. Yeah, what an interesting idea, but so I think that sort of on the evolutionary scale we have, I guess, more to work on, until we get to that
Absolutely.
Right.
point. But
oh yeah.
So now, do you have relationships or do you communicate with other regular Freemasons in the Portland area? Do you have friends that are Masons, that are Grand Lodge Oregon people? And how do they, and what's their view of it? I mean, this is why I ask, right? Is because although I'm relatively sure it's just like it is here, because both Portland and DC are about the same. We're about on the same political wavelength.
From what I've heard, yeah.
Right. So, here, when I worked at the House of the Temple for a long time, and I did communications for them, and things like that, people would ask me all the time, women would be like, we'd take a tour or whatever, and they'd be like, okay, great, done, I'll join. And I was like, here's the deal. This is going to get awkward. And so, but we'd have a conversation. I would say, listen, are you from the area? And they, the ones that were, I would say, all right, great. Well, this is my friend Inessa, and my friend Inessa, she belongs to a lodge. Not necessarily what we're doing, but it is. And you need to call her. She'll explain the rest. And so, it's really funny because, for the Grand Lodge of DC and I think for us around DC, it's sort of this weird don't ask, don't tell kind of a deal, right? Where it's very much, I know you're a Mason. We're just going to leave that alone. We're not going to talk directly about that, but we'll beat around that bush a lot. And so it's really a weird dance that we play here. I wonder, is that the same experience you have a little bit?
Yes.
Right.
There's a lot of yes in that yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm not going to speak for my friends here. They are, I think I sent you the link to my alchemical bromance. If you take a listen to that, you'll know a couple of them. I would love to connect you guys if you'd like to talk to them or interview them.
Yeah, sure.
I'd probably be open to that. One of them thinks they already know you, but that's a whole separate discussion. Speaking from my own personal experience, though, I understand the challenge. So let's say, for example, that I traveled to, Chile and met someone there who said they were a member of LeDroit Humain. They're a female freeman.
Mm-hmm.
And I interact with them, and they invite me to their lodge, and I check in and I try to go there, and it turns out, like, after talking to this person for maybe days, this hasn't happened, it's all hypothetical, and really have great discourse with them and find them to be a sister, a brother, like really through and through someone who I feel like is on the same path with me, and someone I'd love to do ritual with, or see how their laws work. And then I find out that they're not actually recognized by our order, and they're clandestine.
Mm-hmm.
What an awkward position that puts me in, because maybe hopefully I haven't, but in some ways we've already talked about masonry. We just do it with secrets or have you, but we've communicated arguably masonically, which flies against my oath.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand what an awkward position this puts someone in, and I don't have any interest in being controversial or causing an uproar or causing any sort of problems for anyone in their own personal work. But I also found this group of humans in my city who are extremely like-minded, very interesting. We can talk about things that I can talk about with, I can't actually think of, anyone outside of the order except maybe my boyfriend who I can talk about these things with. And, talk about hermeticism or sacred geometry or the Kabbalah or any other esoteric topic. I mean, it's esoteric a lot. So I'm very much, these are honestly some of my closest friends, but I understand the complex situation that they're in, and I don't want to cause any trouble for them individually. But I understand that, like, the things that we're talking about and the conversations and the challenges that we're discussing, I feel like are hugely important. Working towards the betterment of humanity, or it's just charity, whatever it is that we're working on. Obviously, I'm putting my time into it, so it feels important to me. But I understand that there's the letter of the bylaws is what we call them, but that says to not communicate masonically with any clandestine order or member. And communicating masonically to me is not a clear-cut description. Like it feels like something that somebody with an opinion in a higher up place could turn into any number of things.
Sure.
You communicated masonically. You discussed that you were both Masons. You communicated masonically with this person.
Right. Like
it really just feels like very unclear as to what is okay and what isn't. So I'm very like, I believe everybody has masculine and feminine within them. I think masculine and feminine manifests on every plane and every level of existence. So I have masculine and feminine within me. In this place, I am very feminine in the way of like meaning receptive. So like I receive whatever energy and whatever comfort level any individual feels good with communicating with me, and I don't push further than that. I don't feel a need to, and so far everyone it's worked out fine. I hope that it doesn't cause any problems for anyone. I certainly don't want to, the work that they do there is beautiful. And I know that this is a challenging subject. So
yeah, so my standard for this, because the first female Mason that I ever met was a woman by the name of Janet Wintermute, who I think have you met her?
No.
Jason?
No.
Okay. So I think she's in the DC area.
Okay.
And I think she's part of that Belgian feminine thing that you were talking about.
Yep.
And I met her at lunch one day. Like, she was just, this is during Masonic Week, and she just showed up at Ebbett's, and, and she mentioned that she was a Mason, and I was just like, oh, great. And so I thought to myself, oh gosh, is this okay? Am I, I was a pretty new Mason at the time. And so what I realized is that, first of all, she's a perfectly lovely person. Second of all, the rationale that I use is, if it would be discussed within a tiled room, then it's off limits. If I could discuss it on my podcast, if I could discuss it in public, then it's, then that's not communicating Masonically, because to communicate Masonically requires that you create that sort of sacred space where you either seal a lodge and purge it, or you through modes of recognition sort of establish the space between you that becomes Masonically sacred or whatever. Provided that you don't do that, and that your comments are for public consumption, then I don't see the issue. Right. One thing that Mike Hambrecht is on the live stream. He had a question. He said, "Do you see a lot of couples that join in LeDroit Humain?"
I wouldn't say a lot, but certainly there's a significant presence. I haven't seen any couples come in at the same time. It seems to often be one or the other, in my experience. And then one person joins for their own personal reasons, and the other sees the growth or just wants to, calls for them for some reason. But there are a handful. Definitely.
Cool. So from a philosophical standpoint, how do you, based on what you know about, I don't know, I don't even know how to refer to it. English, I always, it's almost like I feel like we need to have a name too, like we call it regular Freemasonry, but that's kind of an insult, you know what I mean? Like regular, English Freemasonry maybe. But based on what you know about our system, what do you think are the major philosophical differences? I mean, aside from gender.
I haven't found any. I haven't found any. I mean, so you guys, your recent episode was on traditional observance. Mm-hmm. I found that a particularly interesting episode because so far, just in listening to that podcast, I haven't done any research beyond that. I have pulled up a website to research ethics, but everything that was described in that, our order actually follows everything that is aligned with traditional observance, Freemasonry, which I found interesting. I'd never actually heard that term before, and I understand that there's, a lot of maybe social perception that comes along with that I don't fully grasp yet. But regardless, we take a moment of meditation before we start our work. Things take years to move the degree work. There's a lot of similarities. There's obviously a lot of differences from the tidbits that I've picked up of how quickly people can move through degrees in some parts of natural masonry. But it's also like Marie Durham was initiated, I believe she moved through a number of degrees within a weekend. That's a long story, and there's reasons for that. But so there are exceptions within our order also. But I haven't found any philosophical differences. I guess the one area where we differ is that we do not require a belief in God. So we, you know, we require that you have some sort of understanding of something larger than yourself, because it references that in you know, the work. But we don't require that you call it God. It's not religious. We don't have a religious bent or agenda. The American Federation here, French might be a little bit different, but you know, here it's very much not political or religious. We accept people of all beliefs, as long as they're worthwhile candidates. You know, so that's the only difference that I can see, and I don't really think it's a huge difference. I think it's more of a way things are worded different. Mm-hmm. We just want people to have the freedom of that choice when they are initiated, and you know, coming from a place of respect. So, you know, if you're an atheist, as long as you're able to say that they're, you know, reference something higher than yourself, or you know, something that can.
So I had a friend who was interested in Masonry, and he felt like he could not join the lodge because he didn't you know, believe in God, I guess, in the, you know, like those three words. Yet when talking to him, you know, he would say things like, I believe in science, I believe in, you know, like, you know, I believe in, like, there would always be something I believe, you know, after the word in, there would be some kind of thing, right? And so that would be okay, right?
Absolutely. You could absolutely fill the blank with science.
So one of the things that, like, I know about, you know, I just want to read a little something to you guys. So this was from the episode that I recorded but never aired about my experience going to Paris and visiting the Grand Orient Museum.
By the way, you're super emo for doing that, but go ahead.
I'm super evil?
Emo.
Oh, emo.
Yeah.
Why?
Just sitting in your dark basement, giving your podcast diary to yourself, basically.
That's right.
It feels too personal. I can't publish it.
Dear diary. Well, no, it wasn't that. It's just that, like, right when I was about to publish it, you and I start doing video, and I'm like,
oh, right. Okay,
like,
I got
it's no fun to, like, just read something, you know, when someone is sitting in the room, you know. But I'm going to make an exception now.
Sure. All right. Go ahead.
So basically what I did was I talked a little bit about kind of the history, and basically what, you know, when this split occurred between France and England and Freemasonry, it really was over the French Revolution, right? Because, you know, at the time England was just scared to death that, you know, that these crazy French revolutionary ideas were you're gonna, you know, jump the channel and you know, overthrow the monarchy and stuff like that. And so I kind of talked a little bit about that, and sort of why they were so anti-Catholic, and why they were so, you know, anti-church, and why they kind of wanted to distance themselves from religion. But then I said, so here's what I think happened. In the beginning, Freemasonry was unitary. We all shared the same values. Masonry existed in the center between the extremes of religion and politics, and we had a definite point of view on the world. Then, after the French Revolution, each style of Freemasonry turned in place to face one of those two extremes, right? Anglo-American Masonry flirts with religion. So we, you know, like our system turned and faced religion, turning our back on politics. And while we don't explicitly endorse religion, I mean, we do have things like, we have a form of Christian Masonry. We have, you know, like the Rosicrucians that require a belief in a Trinity, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't require, you know, we don't have a religious test for Freemasonry or anything like that, but we do kind of flirt with it. We flirt on the boundaries. And then for the you know, and the French in the Orient system did exactly the opposite. So they turned in place facing politics, completely turning their back on religion. And so, like, what's really interesting is, like, so if you go to Paris and you go to the Grand Orient, it's a beautiful building, by the way. and right across the street, I mean, directly across the street, and it's a very narrow street, right? Directly across the street is a bookstore. And if you look in the, when I went there, the bookstore was closed. But if you look in that bookstore, right, all the Masonic books are like political. They're all things like, social policy in Masonry, and how do we build a better world, et cetera, et cetera. And so, so they discuss social action, and in 2010 they finally admitted women into their system. And so what I said is that when that split happened, Masonry lost something, because before, those ideas, those sort of religious and spiritual ideas could kind of mingle with sort of social action, and you could kind of, practice what you preached, as it were. And Masonry is a way to do that in a kind of an ecumenical way. And when that split happened, each system kind of lost something, right? So the French, I feel like, kind of lost that spiritual orientation that Masonry had, and the English lost that sort of social relevance part of it that they had. And because they've been moving in different directions, they've kind of evolved differently. Now, here's the thing, though, Heather. What I hear from you is not consistent with that, right? It sounds like you and the other folks in your lodge are kind of on this type of spiritual quest as well.
This is the difference between the American Federation and Grand Orient of France. It's different in France than it is here. I haven't been, but it's definitely more political. We don't. The American Federation does not get into politics. It's very much part of our. It's integral to what we do, but we do not here. But we also think the work that they're doing in France is important. I agree with what you're saying, though. I hadn't actually thought about it in that way, and I do think there's something lost on both sides. But it's a difficult thing to encompass. So it was an interesting challenge.
So one of the things that I always thought was kind of interesting is, because LeDroit Humain has always been small, right? You guys don't have the problems that we do, where we were once really big and now we're shrinking and we're all freaking out about it. Right?
Right.
We're losing our Masonic buildings. I mean, do you guys have Masonic buildings?
Wait, before we go there, because that's a good question. But wait, because what else is really interesting is that, because I think because you're small, what I notice is that, like, literally I've never ever talked to a co-mason or a female mason who has said to me, like, what we really need to get rid of in my lodge? Pancake breakfasts. Like, that whole thing, like the spaghetti dinner fundraiser, God, it's just awful. Like, they're all like these like you talked about, right? They're the TO lodge, that whole, like, we take this really seriously. There's this deep spiritual thing that we're trying to find together. And, like, I never have heard about any of the kind of crap that we have to deal with what this once was this huge organization is now shrinking and kind of struggling to find its identity again, right? Now you can ask your question about the size of the lodges, but I just wanted to, I find that fascinating, is that never have I heard damn pancake breakfasts,
I mean, do you guys look in on us and be like, "Oh, you poor idiots," like
it must be so nice. Just envy that. That's why I bring it up.
I have definitely heard that sentiment, but I don't harbor it myself. I understand, so as far as I know, I don't know of any lodges that have their own building. There may be. Again, we're a tiny triangle in Seattle, so we're using an Odd Fellows hall. And I know of a couple other lodges that also use Odd Fellows or share with some of the building. There are some much more established lodges on the East Coast, in Mexico, Chile. I don't know what their lodges look like. But if I look back at what began to happen in Freemasonry, throughout the past century, not in order, but you have these old buildings, and you have these, stained glass windows and statues and just really amazing things that have been built, that are historical monuments in and of themselves. And suddenly you have numbers dropping, you have dues dropping. And you're not just like, it's easy for me to think like, well, the point isn't numbers. If numbers are dropping, then just let it go. Like, don't get too attached to what it's supposed to look like. Just, be very zen about it. And, that's nice to say, but it's not realistic in my mind. Like, I feel like it made a lot of sense for the changes that happened, in suddenly trying to keep numbers up, because the things at stake were important. And it, aside from just the personal, sentiment that the men who made those decisions were watching this thing that was integral to them, it was hugely important to society, to their own lives and the well-being of their immediate community and the community at large, and that's disappearing. And there were a lot of changes that happened around that. It feels to me, obviously not having been there for many reasons, that there was a shift of intent, almost like a preservation mindset kicked in, and the intent shifted. And I appreciate the efforts that were put in, because actually, to rewind a bit, I think you asked me a while ago what I thought the purpose of Freemasonry was. Hope I'm not getting too long-winded here.
No. Not at all. Keep going. Okay. Have you heard our show? It's all just long. Jesus.
Yes.
Please.
Fair enough. Okay. So, back from what I understand, best of my education anyway, Freemasonry, in its earliest roots, as we can tell, was started with Masons moving between, out of their lords and ladies' little bubbles, and they were allowed to freely move beyond to go gather knowledge on how to build some grand entryway they wanted for a palace. So it's like, yeah, nobody else can leave. If you leave, you can never leave this little plot of land. This entire society built on like, nobody can leave. Mm-hmm. But you guys, you can go. You're free. And they go and they learn all this amazing, knowledge from wherever they go, India, China, Egypt, what have you. And then they come back and they build the thing, but their minds have been open. But they can't talk to their, like farmer neighbor who's never left the 20 feet around his house. So in my mind, what happened, as I understand it, is they started like connecting with other people. Like they find other like-minded people who can talk with about this person. They also experienced something. Let's talk about it. But it was dangerous, because then you're opening minds in ways that might make people want to like leave this land, and you're causing an uproar for the Lord, and it can be risking your life ultimately to talk about these things. So you start having these hidden meetings in the woods with guys with swords and like protecting, and you're all you're really trying to do is talk and have a safe space and communicate freely about like humanity and the human experience. And I feel like, sure, there's been a lot of sprouts of, political things that come along with that intent as it grows and changes throughout history. But ultimately, we feel like we've moved past that somehow. But if you look at the other areas of the world, I mean, even here, it's controversial, but there are many areas in the world where you could still be put to death for, talking too much about these sorts of things. So it's not something that we've moved past. And in my mind, that is a key and vital part that Freemasonry plays in the world, to not get too grandiose about it. But like, ultimately, that is what I feel its highest purpose is to hold space for open dialogue and opening minds, and really tackling, what it is that's doing here, and just being open to that and not judging it and not, so the idea of, people in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s trying to preserve this down to this day, like, if you're going to put a bunch of guys through making third degree in a weekend because you need to get your dues up, like, do I have qualms with that? Ideologically, yes. Do I understand why? Yes. Am I going to judge you for it? No. Like, does it create a strange version of what I know as Freemasonry? A little bit, but so what? Like, it's ultimately, like, we're all working towards the same thing, and it's up to every lodge to decide who is fit to be made a Mason, and that's not my place to have really even an opinion on.
Okay, I dig.
Yeah, so do I. That's fantastic.
Wow, that's like the best answer I've ever heard.
Yeah, it was great. 10 points.
So one last question for you, and that is, do you wear your affiliation like we do? Like, do you put stickers on your car, and do you have a Masonic ring, or do you wear it points in and points out?
Do you argue with people what way the wings should be facing?
No, I don't argue with people about that. But I did actually bring my pin, which I do wear.
Yeah, that's cool.
Ah.
Ring. Reflection there.
It's not Masonry without bling.
I can't.
That's nice.
There we go.
Well,
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So it's a star in the center.
Yeah. Right.
Because the true
Cool. Yeah.
the true wages of a Master Mason is a lapel pin.
A lapel pin.
That's
Yeah.
correct. That is absolutely
And I
100%.
actually have another one here. I wear.
Uh-huh.
Ah.
Hey,
Yep.
look at that.
Yep.
That's clap.
Yep. So full disclosure, everybody, Heather is one of our executive producers. She's a supporter.
So she gets
one of our proudest. Like when I was just like, Heather, I don't know any guys named Heather, and I was just like, ooh, like it just so like the light bulb went on. I'm like, oh, okay, this is awesome.
I'm going to use that from now on. I don't know any guys named Heather.
Well, like every once in a while, like you'll see like a Leslie show up,
Right.
or a Kelly shows up, or Pat.
Yeah,
Right?
You don't know. You don't know.
Yeah, but no.
On my 3.5-hour trips up to Seattle, that's what I would do. I'd listen to you guys. I mean, I still do.
Yay, that's nice.
That's
See
great.
what I tell you about long-winded, Eric.
See?
3.5-hour car tours.
Thank
were
you for being
perfect
long-winded.
My pleasure. So I just want to say thank you, Heather, so much. It has been such an absolute pleasure. Please come back.
Thanks, Heather. That was a lot of fun.
Anytime.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it was.
anytime. Thanks for having me.
So if any women are listening and you want to like pursue Freemasonry, LeDroit Humain is an option. There are feminine obediences. Check in your area. Is there like a website that they can go to that they can get more information on, so they don't have to go through the same like convoluted search that you went on to find to get hooked up?
The French is
I kind of liked that process, so I still will send people to that website if they ever ask me.
Oh, okay.
but no, you can go to comasonics.org.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Heather. Thanks, you,
Heather.
Jason. It's been great fun, and we'll see you guys next time. By the way, if you're listening to this show and you like what you hear, please consider becoming a supporter for $5 a month. You are making this show possible, and we've been making, like, this year has seen tremendous improvements in what we're able to bring you, and we've got more in store. But to do that, we need your help, and so if you can. Consider becoming an executive producer. We're about to revamp the welcoming kits and stuff like that. So if you haven't gotten yours yet, you will be getting one. And even if you have gotten one, you'll probably be getting a new one, because like I said, we're gonna revamp the whole thing. So Heather, you'll be getting more lapel pins. And so to do that, you can go to our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/X-Oriente. That's XORIENTE. Other than that, if you want to, we would love to hear what your comments are. Please leave us a message on our X-Oriente Facebook page, or drop us a line at xoriente@gmail.com. And with that, I'm signing off. Eric Diamond.
I'm Jason Van Dyke. Good night.
And that's Heather D.
I'm Heather
Fulton.
Fulton. Good night.